وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. I'm about to proceed. Assalamu alaikum. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to bring us to Jumu'ah, inshallah. Your brother will be brief, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the one who was supposed to hold this Alim station. It got into a bit of a hold up, inshallah. So it'll be extremely brief, inshallah. Quickest khutbah on earth. I'll try my best to. A few weeks ago, alhamdulillah, I had to recite poetry in Philly, alhamdulillah. And so I got on a plane there, stayed the night, got up, did the event, recited poetry, and then the very next morning, inshallah, I was due to leave, the afternoon actually. And so I went to the airport, routine, alhamdulillah, been on the airplane a few times, enough times to be prepared for anything that could happen. And so as I got to the airport and I'm reporting, I'm giving them all the things that they need to see, boarding documents or what have you. I went ahead and got seated in the waiting area and I sat there, alhamdulillah. And as time went on, closer to the time where the plane is supposed to depart, we started getting information about how systems were down and rain was covering runways and they weren't able to get planes off the ground as fast as they wanted to. Up until they basically said that all planes will be grounded. So they gave people a few options. You can go downstairs to the ticket counter and figure out what your next move is going to be. You're going to get a plane from Philly to wherever you're going. You're going to get a rent-a-car or what have you. And so I went down there with a long line of people who assumed that they were just going to go down there and get it fixed. You know, we get into a customer service. We go with the assumption like we just going to barge in there, cuss out who is ever at the front desk, and they're going to give us exactly what we want. So I watched droves of people going back and forth with customer service agents, being extremely nasty to them, not understanding that these people really don't have power over whether or not they can actually put your behind on the plane and get you home or get you wherever you want to be at. And so as they started getting more and more riled up, you know, alhamdulillah, I'm just happy I wasn't out in the rain. It doesn't make me any special. So I just went up to the desk and said, you know, what options do I have? And they said, well, the next plane is going to go out in like 2 days or 3 days. And I love Philly, but I wasn't staying in Philly 3 more days. And so I'm from Baltimore, so I thought to myself, all right, how can I finesse this? All right, I'm going to just go ahead and try to head home. And so I had to, it was like 12:30 at night, call my mother, alhamdulillah. And we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the ability to call our mothers. So I called my mother in the midst of the night. I said, I gotta come shoot home to 118. That's the address. I said, I gotta shoot home to 118. And she's, alhamdulillah, come on. Where you at? You in Philly? Get on the train. Just come on. And so I got on the Amtrak all the way to Baltimore. And alhamdulillah, I end up on the footsteps of my childhood house. And so as many of us think about the situations that we find ourselves in, or the situations that we think we're going to be. I thought I was going to be right back home, enough in time to catch Maghrib here at least catch the Burda, or at least catch Isha right here with you all. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted me at the doorsteps of my mother's house. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted me to be able to have a brief conversation because I had a flight the next day. So it wasn't like I was able to kick it with her a long time, but alhamdulillah, that beautiful angelic face, I was able to see it. And so as I'm reminded, as the news is coming on now, about how airports are shut down, how people can't catch flights, some people are stuck in places that they didn't assume that they were going to be. Reminded that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qadr overpowers whatever we may think we're about to do. Whatever we think we're about to get ourselves into, wherever we think we're going to be, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qadr will overtake us, right? And it'll drag us to wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants our behinds to be at. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, He reminds us of a person who is doing all of the dhunub, all of the sins of Jahannam, up until a certain point at the end of their life, and that they reach a point to where they are a cubit, a cubit away from entering the fire in what they're doing and what they have habituated in the lifestyle that they've lived. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qadr overtakes them. His will and his decree overtakes them. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to build the tawfiq, the ability for that servant to then change course, about face, and start doing the deeds of Jannah, and start doing the deeds of the garden. And that person, as we would witness just change, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enters them into Jannah. Likewise, someone who is doing all of the deeds of Jannah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection from this. The one is doing all the deeds of Jannah up until they are a cubit away, a dirah away, an arm span away from Jannah. Jannah is right there. And all of those things that they have habituated, all of those things they've learned that have become a part of their character, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees that that person then would start doing the deeds of Jahannam. And that person enters Jahannam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be among the former and not the latter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هَلْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا السَّاعَةَ أَن تَأْتِيَهُمْ بَغْيَةً وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. He says, are they waiting for the hour to take them by surprise when they least expect it? The next ayah is the one we discussed briefly. He says, الْآخِلَاءُ يَوْمَئِذٍ بَعْضُهُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌ إِلَّا الْمُتَّقِينَ. He said, close friends will be enemies to one another on that day, except the righteous. And we spoke briefly last night about friends. And I forgot to mention that on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on our day of accounting, Yawm al-Hisab, that there were those who were beloved friends in dunya, bosom buddies in dunya, right? Day ones. And on Yawm al-Qiyamah, when they're standing before Allah, the inverse relationship will happen. They will become bitter enemies. And one will say to the other one, no, you dragged me to hell. And then the other one would say, no, it was really you that dragged me to hell. All the time we spent together, all the things we took part in, it was really you who was conquering my mind. It was you who was conquering my heart and pushing me towards these things. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if he decides to give us friends, and sometimes we think friends are people that we like, and we think friends are people that we enjoy. A friend is not someone you're always getting along with. A friend, inshallah, is somebody who's always going to be truthful and reminding you of the nur of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Likewise, someone who is your friend is someone who's going to tell you when you did wrong, and when you have the ability to tell them that they did wrong. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in a narration by Anas bin Malik, said, none of you should wish for death because of a calamity befalling him, but if he has to wish for death, he should say, O Allah, keep me as alive as long as life is better for me, and let me die if death is better for me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is willing life for many of folk today, inshallah. He's willed life for us, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this life that we're living and things that we're doing with our breaths, right, is better for us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also willing death. He's willing death, inshallah, for those where death was better for them. And as this community here, elsewhere, what have you, as these communities begin to have the young and the elderly stripped away from this plane, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that their deaths are better for them, inshallah. And we also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we not take for granted, had they been that good friend, had they been that wise counsel, had they been that reminder when you see their face of, I miss Dhuhr. Oh man, I was supposed to pray. We were supposed to be reading that book. We were supposed to be going to that class. We were supposed to be entering that gathering. We were supposed to be eating, with the believers or whatever it could be, that we not take for granted those hearts and those souls that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as one man said recently, this white guy on the internet, he said, the people you're on earth with right now, these are the people that you got. And so whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allotted us of friends, these are the people that we got. Inshallah, for better or worse. Whether we have to distance ourselves from them a bit or grow near to them, these are the people Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided to place in our orbit, and our interaction and our behavior with them, right? The onus is on us to make it good or bad, inshallah. And so as we see the world is shut down again, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, particularly for this community, four or 5 years ago. It's been a while. When we first moved here, my family first moved here, alhamdulillah. And we think and we love the community here. And as you know, we were caught in the community, and the community was caught in us. One of the most beautiful things that we were able to witness, of course, you know, inshallah, you step behind the veil, you see whatever issues people may have. But one of the beautiful things was that there were people who were striving to build some sort of cohesion at that particular time. There were people that, despite their differences, despite their different temperaments, despite their different ways of doing things, even if they were clashing, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was placing in their hearts an orientation towards mission, an orientation towards their covenant with the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that superseded personality. It superseded whatever groups, whatever cliques, or what have you. At least this is what I noticed. And so as time goes on, alhamdulillah, and like anybody, it's like your cousin that comes stay the night, and then your mother say after 2 weeks, yeah, he gotta go because he tripping in here. Same thing, you get to learn what goes on behind the household. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed, for whatever reason, that clashes start to begin. And we're only sometimes reminded of how petty things are when we end up losing people. When the faces that we once cherished, the illuminated faces that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in our lives, we only start to realize how valuable they were, how much we receive from them in light, until what we're doing, we're reciting Yasin over their graves. We're reciting Surah Al-Mulk over their graves. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to take care of this community, but we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to place this community in special care. In special care, there's a special onus on the Detroit community. It's a special onus. Why is that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed that a lot of the fruits of this path of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first seeds, some of the first seeds in this particular land, in this sort of resurrection of people, would take place here. So that's an amana on anybody who is here for 2 minutes, let alone if you have generations here. Let alone if you got generations here. If you're here for 2 hours, inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you become a part of the work and improving that, and that we put our egos, cliques, tribes, personalities, ways of doing things, or what have you, and put it to the side for the initial mission, that initial mission that was set upon by those elders who walked these streets, right, when it wasn't safe. A lot of us, we walk streets that's safe now because somebody else cleaned them up. So that's an amana even upon ourselves. And so, narrated by Abu Hurairah, radiallahu anhu, said, that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that there's a sadaqah to be given for every joint of the human body. And on every day on which the sun rises, there's a reward of sadaqah, right? This charitable gift for the one who establishes justice among people. And so you can say, well, how can I contribute? Maybe if you find yourself in a place of leadership or a place of amana, inshallah, we right wrongs. And we don't celebrate wrong. That we right wrongs amongst the people, and we right wrongs amongst the hearts, inshallah. It's also narrated by Utban bin Malik al-Ansari. He said that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if anybody comes on the day of resurrection who has said, La ilaha illallah, sincerely, with the intention to win Allah's pleasure, Allah will make the hellfire forbidden for him. And so as we close, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make hellfire forbidden for us. But also remember that those in which we're dealing with, those we're fighting tooth and nail about, whatever we're fighting tooth and nail about, these are people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, one, made hellfire forbidden for, which means what? Which means what? The inverse is that we should all consider ourselves dealing with people of Jannah, inshallah. And then inshallah, the hope is that we all get along in Jannah. Right? We'll be having too much of a good time to be. If you're beefing in Jannah, subhanAllah, you really got it in. We don't, but inshallah, there will be no fights over the riyasa. There will be no fights over leadership, right? No quarrels or anything like that. But our ability to rise in station there, right? Rise in station there is our ability now to settle disputes amongst ourselves. Settle disputes amongst ourselves before it's too late. Before it's too late. Imam Ghazali, he said, there are people, he said in Bidayat al-Hidayah, in the beginning of guidance, he said there are people who have busied themselves feverishly building castles to the sky. And this is a reality, real reality now. All right, we can go across the world now. There's some buildings, you go up into the top of it, and you're in the sky. There's clouds floating around you. He said there are people who have busied themselves with that. Spent years and years and years of how they're going to build this marvel of modern architecture. And he said, but ultimately, their grave will be beneath the dirt. Their tomb will be beneath the dirt that way, not that way. And so we understood that reality. It will put a lot of things in perspective. It will put a lot of things in perspective. We will begin, whether we get along with them or not, we will begin to, at the very least, cherish every soul that we come across as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. And we will walk lightly upon earth as we are commanded to, inshallah. Ali radiallahu anhu, I'm going to share this shortly, that Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, إن أخاك الحق من كان معك ومن يضر نفسه لينفعك. He said, ومن إذا ريب زمان صدعك شتت فيه شمله ليجمعك. Radiallahu anhu, he said in poetic form, he said, verily your brother is he who is really with you, who will harm himself to benefit you. That's the first two couplets. And then he said, and who, when the troubles of the time break you, and it is breaking people. The troubles of the time are breaking people. There's some people in those airports who are right on the edge of a mental health crisis, right on the edge of dealing with whatever crisis in their life, and the loss of an air flight, it was the click for them, and they went overboard. And so he said, and who, when the troubles of the time break you, will shatter himself to pieces in order to gather you together. And so, lastly, I ask of myself, and I ask of everyone here in this locality, specific to this locality, because these are faces we got to see every day. Where are those? Where are those people? When will those people rise again who shatter themselves, right, to put their friends back together? Who will completely shatter themselves, or will they, take some advice from these other people and be like, oh, no, you got to think about yourself first. You got to make sure that you straight. No, where are those people at again? When there are two people who are like that, when there are two people who are accommodating like that in any sphere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will rain mercy down upon those people. He will rain mercy down upon those people. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who shatter themselves so that their brother or sister can be put back together. And that when that brother or sister is put back together, they're whole enough to help them out when they need to get put back together. We just have a big put together party, big puzzle people, inshallah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, hamdan yuafi ni'amahu yukafi mazidah, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعلينا معهم وفيهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. إني أوصيكم وإياي بتقوى الله. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أطعنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to nurture these hearts that have become hard and to preserve these hearts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed have gone astray, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala walk and run them back to the nur of His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that those we have lost recently and in the distant past, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right now at this moment is showing them the window to their station in Jannah, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just as He has united our faces in this time and in this area, in this era, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to gaze upon the same faces with a new outlook of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon us. And Allah ya'mur bil adli wa ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkar wal baghi ya'idhukum la'allakum tattaqun. Wa ladhikrullahi akbar wallahu ya'lamu ma taf'alun. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what we do. Kama salah.